Hey guys, Robbie K here, coming at you with the fourth movie review of the day, talking about probably the biggest talk of the town this weekend in terms of the films coming out. That is The Upside, starring Kevin Hart and Bryan Cranston, an elite combo who are very popular for different movies and genres, coming together to hopefully bring us a comedy that is very, hopefully, toe-tapping and enlightening based on what they usually do. But before we get into that, thank you very much for joining the channel, for checking me out, and as always, much appreciated to the fan base for keeping me going. Regards today, let's explain if you're new to the channel. Number one, we do a kind of review of what the trailer is about, with no spoilers, of course, that aren't already in the trailer. Then number two comes into the fact of, again, a spoiler-free quick review, usually done around the 6-minute mark. And then we finish up with a more in-detail review to kind of give you a little more sustenance so you can see whether or not this is what you want. So let's get started. The Upside is essentially a remake of a 2011 film called The Untouchables, which pretty much is the same premise, almost down to the T, but this time moved to New York instead of a European country. So as a result, Kevin Hart is a down-on-his-luck gentleman looking for work and stumbles upon a man named P, as he likes to call him, or Phil, who is essentially a quadriplegic after some sort of event that I can't tell you because that wasn't in the trailer. As such, the two start developing a bond between caretaker and, of course, patient as they go about trying to adapt to a new life that was at one point looking bleak. The hope is, based on the trailer, a lot of zany fun and adventures that Kevin Hart's famous for, but you never know with the trailers. And as such, here we go with the kind of review, because I don't want to reveal anything else because that will ruin the plot. So nevertheless, when it comes to the Upside, the movie is actually quite a surprise in terms of how different a comedy it actually is. Not quite Kevin Hart's usual style of hitting you over the head with constant amounts of jokes and screaming. The Upside does a much better job of taking a somber story and using the comedy a little more creatively and not bashing you over the head. It's definitely a more darker themed, I guess, or at least a more depressing theme at times, but it's realistic and it works. The two have great chemistry together with writing that I actually think is pretty decent for a usual movie of their caliber, and it works in terms of an entertaining pace, though maybe a little bit of editing here and there. Nevertheless, I most certainly enjoyed kind of the chemistry between it and just the, I guess, less intense focus that sometimes comes with either of these guys. It works with good character, with semi-decent character development and some incorporation of some other components. And while that kind of works on some levels, I can definitely see where the reviewers decided to pick it apart a little bit. And as such, sorry, I ended up getting a weird alert. Anyway, I can see why the critics kind of picked it apart because I don't think it quite delivers all the way across where, all the way across of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think it delivers across all fronts like it really wants to, and maybe doesn't maximize to the full potential of what the various story developing goes. But for a common kind of viewing and check-in, it actually surprised me at how much I enjoyed the movie in terms of the balance of comedy when I was expecting a little more of the same thing. Nevertheless, this movie's probably not going to be for everyone, but I totally encourage you to go give this one a check out. Now, as a result, where does the limitations come in? As I said, it doesn't quite hit every aspect, and I think depending on what you're walking into, thinking from the trailer, you're going to be a little more misled based on some of the scenes that they've shown you, which are very scarce in terms of the energy theme. But again, there's a little more storytelling to this than a usual Kevin Hart film, and a little more energy compared to what a Bryan Cranston film is. Nevertheless, what are the scores for this one? In terms of comedy and drama, and I guess we could technically put a biography on this, we're probably looking at about a 7 in terms of it. Maybe, I'll say probably a 7. In terms of movie overall, we're probably hitting about the 5.5, 6.0 mark, just in terms of some of the things that the more detailed review will do. Anyways, guys, if this is where you're ready to head out, thank you very much for checking into the channel. More so for just giving me a shout out and a look into. As always, like, share, bring it up to me in terms of comments. Get a discussion going. That will be fun. And if there's anything I can do to improve or a way that I can maybe have a better time sharing this, please let me know. And I'll do my best to make that happen. Until then, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. If I haven't lost you yet, let's get into the details. The upside, I like this, as always, I start with my likes. And the upside's likes first start off with that. The film has just got a nice pace to it. In terms of somber films like this, you sometimes get those movies that are very dragged out. So stuck in depression that you're kind of counting what's hopefully hours by, and it's only a couple of minutes. This is some of the Clint Eastwood films in the modern day, or a Nicholas Sparks movie that decides to go a little more mush than actual romantic comedy. And in this case, I can say that the pace was much better than I anticipated, especially given the theme of the movie. The antics kind of keep things fun and laughable, and even though there's always a dark air hanging around, you've got the comedy there to lift you up. And that's another like, is that even though this is a depressing topic, ironically, there is an upside to it. So it works very well for me. The jokes, as you heard in my first review, work well. And it's not that I hate Kevin Hart just bashing you over the head with joke after joke after joke after joke after joke. But sometimes in a movie, when I'm looking to give it higher scores, it's about finding the balance to not let things go stale and work to kind of progress and find a reason to ground the comedy. And I think it worked in this one for me. At least it had something there. The storytelling is, yes, not the most complete, but it's at least guiding it. And the comedy is clever, a little more down to earth, and it fits into the theme of the movie, taking both the lighthearted and the dark-hearted side of what this film has to offer. Now, in regards to kind of seeing some awesome cars, if you're like a Fast and the Furious person and love seeing high-profile, expensive cars, well, again, you're going to see this component into it as well. It's a small like, but hey, you got to give them props for finding a medium to tell their story through, and the cars actually do happen to be that way. In regards to anything else, I think it does a nice job of bringing some of the cultural aspects of New York City into it. Sort of that Romeo and Juliet, different types of families having different motives, and you get to see a little bit of that. And even the inclusion of Nicole Kidman's character mixes well, because the secondary characters, though not the most integrated, do have their part and help kind of guide things and progress certain aspects of the film. So, kudos to them on that. And especially because I like how Nicole Kidman's usual way that the directors want her to portray a character, it was a little more curved back, a nice change. But definitely the selling point of this, in terms of everything I've already talked about, is that the actors are probably the stronghold for this one. Bryan Cranston, if you like him in Breaking Bad, you know the man is an artist and knows how to take lines and really run with them. And I think he did well in this one. Again, it's a role that's probably a little less complex than some of his other characters, and I don't think it quite matches the same bravado that you saw with the other gentleman when you were watching The Untouchables. But he brings that all the Bryan Cranston atmosphere elements that you like. The dry comedy and the sarcasm, the sort of blunt delivery that really works, but yet has a manner of making a believable character. And it works for me as kind of a counterweight to the sort of angry ire and aloof one that Kevin Hart's character Del brought in. Kevin Hart, again, is one of those that usually sticks to his guns, but I was very happy with seeing the gentleman take on a more serious role, and one that didn't completely get rid of his talents, but at the same time didn't get rid of his talents, but at the same time did not, oversell them. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it, is that seeing a more balanced version of his comedy really kind of shed some light and proved he can take on some other roles. As a result, the two's chemistry is probably what I think feels very good. A balance of definitely two guys who are in the situation having that kind of relationship in terms of a caregiver evolving while another guy kind of on his last leg of life looking for a means to escape. It works so well. And I was quite happy with the end result of how they were able to bring their characters to life. So kudos, guys, because you did a bang-up job for it. Now, in regards to anything else, I I think that's where the likes really end. Let's get to some areas of improvement. The first thing is that the trailer is definitely misleading. If you're kind of thinking more of like the bucket list, or you're seeing some zany adventures between these two, it's definitely not that carbon copy that you were thinking. Definitely more along the lines of the Untouchables. The upside is definitely a little more on the realistic side, and not quite the same adventure that you might have been expecting based on, again, the clips. Sure, everything is almost included in it, but I don't quite think it has the same night on the town adventure that we sometimes see with these types of movies. So if you're going into there kind of thinking that, you may be a little disappointed in terms of that aspect. As I mentioned earlier, there are some secondary characters that are introduced, some of which are done very well, others not so much, including some rivals and potentially some guys of the past who are sort of included in there. Yes, it's based on a biography as it is, and while the Untouchables did manage to also not necessarily hit everything that it needed to, I think this movie had a lot of room for improvement or needing to change the kind of dynamic, because I don't think they quite sold the backstories as well as they were hoping to. In regards to it, what I mean is, like, there are some backstories between both of the characters that are touched upon, but not necessarily focused. Not really major character driven, and no hindrances that sometimes come with post-traumatic disorders or past mistakes that continue to rear its ugly face. So I have to say that it's definitely a little disappointing that we didn't get more of that component into it. Again, in terms of seeing some of the character development, I wanted a little more in regards to that, and more so just looking for probably a little more lightness to offset some of the more somber attitude to it. It's predictable as well for the most part, and once you've seen the trailer, you can understand like the context of each of the scenes, as you're just waiting to get to those points, with the exception of maybe the ending, which, of like the Untouchables, since I haven't seen that in a while, feels a little rushed at the end. Again, those story element components kind of hastily integrated to do a nice little wrap up package that kind of fit in order to kind of close those backstories, but at the same time, nothing in regards to the satisfying conclusion when that, because the stories just weren't that developed. You continue watching, though, and looking for the fun antics. I guess there was an ending scene that kind of tied up their relationship well, but it might have been a little better to go down the traditional kind of bucket list pathway than the way they chose. So after all this rambling and dodging, though, let's kind of wrap this up. As I said, the upside turned out to be a remake that I had fun with, and probably of the 4 movies I've seen, probably was either my favorite or my second favorite of the 4 that I touched on this weekend. As I said, Kevin Hart and Bryan Cranston's chemistry is probably the selling point for it, and if you're like much of the audience in there and me, you'll chuckle at the smarter humor and a little held back. But if you're looking for a kind of a laugh fest, hit you over the head, usual kind of Kevin Hart just with a different actor, not the case for you in this one. Definitely going down a different pathway. The storytelling is there. I think they capture the relationships semi-well, but the backstories probably need a little work, or maybe we needed a little more of the fun atmosphere if they weren't going to focus on it. Nevertheless, worth a shot in the theater. Of the 4, this is probably the one that's worth a visit more so than any of them. But you're definitely probably wanting to hold out until you get this one at Netflix or at home. So nevertheless, this is Robbie signing out. Thank you guys again for joining me. Again, the movie scores are probably, genre is about a 7. Maybe a 6.5 at the lowest, while the movie itself is probably a 5.5 to 6. The Untouchables is probably going to be the preferred means because it had its components right from the beginning and had a little more time investment. But nevertheless, give this one a shot if you're a Kevin Hart fan and Bryan Cranston. Thanks again. Please like, comment, let me know how to improve. Constructive criticism is always welcome. Until then, guys, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.